And again, I wonder how many things would be going so wrong today if we could resist the unsavory characters and their unsavory desires in the first place. For example, Iran in 1953, the CIA thought it would be a dandy idea to overthrow the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh and install the Shah back into power, who was lividly hated by his own people, so much so that he had to constantly wage military war against Iranian citizens, couldn't give him enough guns, couldn't give him enough torture devices. Finally, the Iranian people overthrew the Shah anyway, but at a great cost. The Shah literally killed off all moderate, non-religious opposition to his rule, so the only people who were organized who were left was violent, fundamentalist Muslim fanatics led by Ayatollah Khomeini. And once Khomeini and the mullahs got into power in Iran, violent Islamic fundamentalist uprisings began to erupt all over that part of the world and beyond. I can't help but wonder how much of this we'd be dealing with today if we'd left the Iranian people alone in the 1950s and let them elect their own government. Other unsavory characters we couldn't resist getting into bed with were the Mujahideen guerrillas in Afghanistan, who, according to Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, in an interview published in France last year, he bragged that we started training, organizing, and arming those Mujahideen guerrillas 6 months before the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. We did it as a scam to try and trick the Soviets into falling into a war, and we didn't care who we used to get it. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, regardless of whether they think we're all infidels and want to kill us too. And besides, their dope is pretty good. Another interesting article from the British Guardian from September 29th, 2001 had this to say about the Afghan-Soviet War. In 1979, after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the CIA and Pakistan's ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence Spy Agency, considered the best in the region, launched the largest covert operation in the history of the CIA. Their purpose was to harness the energy of the Afghan resistance to the Soviets and expand it into a holy war, an Islamic jihad, which would turn Muslim countries within the Soviet Union against the communist regime and eventually destabilize it. When it began, it was meant to be the Soviet Union's Vietnam. It turned out to be much more than that. Over the years, through the ISI, the CIA funded and recruited almost 100,000 radical Mujahideen guerrillas from 40 Islamic countries as soldiers for America's proxy war. The rank and file of the Mujahideen were unaware that their jihad was actually being fought on behalf of Uncle Sam. The irony is that America was equally unaware that it was financing a future war against itself. In 1989, after being bloodied by 10 years of relentless conflict, the Russians withdrew, leaving behind a civilization reduced to rubble. Civil war in Afghanistan raged on. The jihad spread to Chechnya, Kosovo, eventually to Kashmir, where it's still going on, and India and Pakistan are on the brink of having a nuclear war now over it. We offered to look the other way at Pakistan's nuke program if they'd let us use their country to go fight people in Afghanistan, by the way. The CIA continued to pour in money and military equipment, but the overheads had become immense and more money was needed. The Mujahideen ordered farmers to plant opium as a revolutionary tax, quote unquote. The ISI set up hundreds of heroin laboratories across Afghanistan. Within 2 years of the CIA's arrival, the Pakistan-Afghanistan borderland had become the largest producer of heroin in the world. and the single biggest source of the heroin on American streets that were helping kill my friends. The annual profits, said to be between $100 and $200 billion, were plowed back into training and arming militants, including a young hothead with a real big trust fund by the name of Osama bin Laden. And after the Soviet Union was driven out of Afghanistan, did we finish the job? Did we go in there and so much as thank the Afghan people for allowing us to use their country as a killing field and all? Oh no, you made great corpses and cannon fodder, but see you later. Didn't rebuild the roads, didn't rebuild the cities, didn't even disarm all those different mujahideen guerrilla groups who then took all the guns we gave them and fired on each other, kind of like they are today. They degenerated into rival warlords that were killing so many people, it made the Taliban look pretty good. When two different factions of the Northern Alliance I would use the term loosely to describe them, were both fighting over control of Kabul, the capital, third of the city destroyed, 50,000 people dead. In that part of the world, our abandonment of the Afghan people is called the Great Betrayal. So if we think they're suddenly going to turn around and trust us in the Middle East and embrace Yankee-style democracy and Baywatch and McDonald's all of a sudden, we might want to think again. The United Nations Drug Control Policy Center reported in October, right after September 11th, that half the heroin still coming from Afghanistan, which is a lot, was coming from the 10% of the country then controlled by the Northern Alliance. And now that we've given most of the rest of the country back to them, poppies are springing up all over again. And even when the Taliban were running things and slaughtering their own people in a way only Pol Pot could love, we gave them $140 million a year in foreign aid and another $43 million bonus in the spring of 2001 as their reward for fighting drugs. And on top of that, a lot of the people who poured into Afghanistan to join the jihad came from Pakistani schools called madrasas, religious schools created and financed by our friends, the Saudi royal family, whose own interpretation of Islam is along the Wahhabi lines and is almost as severe as the Taliban themselves, especially towards women. But hey, they have oil, we like them. Here they are building up these religious schools that take in people who don't have any money for another school, maybe don't have a home or a place to eat, take them in as children, they'll feed them, they'll shelter them, and instead of teaching them what we think of as an education, they study the Quran over and over and over again through the eyes of narrow-minded, fundamentalist religious clerics. So when they graduate from madrasas, they can hardly wait to go join the jihad and blow up some Americans and die and go indulge in the black-eyed virgins or whatever they teach them at the madrasas. Why are the madrasas so popular? They've multiplied in Pakistan faster than Starbucks does over here. Because the Pakistani government hardly spends any money on its own school system anymore. They've cut it and cut it and cut it to the point where most of the schools are closed. The ones that are still there, the windows are gone, desks, books, etc. are very hard to come by. Reason being, the Pakistani government cut education to put the money into their nuclear program and to pay off all the debts they have to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Yes, there is a link between World Bank and IMF to international terrorism by helping create those situations in the first place. Fighting against the World Bank, the IMF, the WTO, the Free Trade Agreement of the Americas, and corporate dictatorship and privatization in general, that's not terrorism, it's fighting terrorism.